Right royal correct, rich source, dress. 6 English words with no business being in the same sentence. 1 is a direction, 1 is a job description. 1 is what a teacher does to your homework in red pen. 1 is what you put on in the morning. They are the same word, and the thing underneath them is not a moral and it is not a crown. It is a straight line. Here is the map with the answer cut out of it. 3 roads, 15 words, and at the bottom 1 syllable nobody has said out loud in about 5,000 years. The roads have no names yet and the route is a question mark. That is on purpose. Watch the words go by first and see whether you can feel what sorts them, because the sorting principle is the whole story and it is not what you would guess. Right, the moral one, the word you use when you mean a thing is good or true or owed to you. It is the oldest word on this map and the one that has wandered furthest from home. Royal, kings, palaces, blood, nothing to do with morals. Or with the next 4 words either, apparently. Correct, what the answer key says, what the teacher writes in the margin. A word about being accurate, about matching some standard that already exists somewhere. Rich, money. And this one is not from Latin, which you can hear. It is short, it is blunt, it is Germanic to the bone. Hold on to that, it matters later. Source, where river starts, where rumor starts, where the money comes from. A word about origins, which is about as far from morals and monarchy as you can get. And dress, clothes, fabric, getting ready. A moral, a monarch, a mark on a page, a bank balance, a spring, and a garment. If you were told to find the family resemblance you would give up, and you would be right to. Because the resemblance is not in the meanings, it is in a gesture. The root is h-reg. In proto-indo-european, reconstructed as h3reg, and it means to straighten, to move in a straight line, to make a thing go the way it ought to go. That is the whole root, not an idea about justice, not an idea about power. It is your arm coming up and pointing, and the line your arm makes. Every word on this map is that line, doing something else for a living. The first road is the literal one, and it explains the other 2. In Latin, the verb is rego, I keep straight, I guide, I direct. A physical verb. You use it about a plowman holding a furrow, a helmsman holding a course. And English took it, again and again, in pieces. Start with right, because right did not come through Latin at all. It came up the Germanic side and arrived in Old English as rit, which meant straight. Not straight as a metaphor. Straight as in a road that does not bend. Old English used rit for a line, for a direction, and for a person and made no distinction between them, because to that mind they were the same property. So the moral sense of right, the one you would swear is what the word is for, is the metaphor. Straightness came first. Goodness is what English decided straightness must be like. Correct is the same claim, said in Latin, corriger con together plus reger, to make straight. So when a teacher corrects a sentence, the picture being run is that the sentence went crooked and is being pulled back into line. And when someone is corrected, a child, a prisoner, a facility called a correctional institution, it is the same picture, about bending a thing back. The red pen is a straightening tool. That is what the word says. Direct is dis plus reger, to straighten apart, to lay a line out in a particular direction. And direct is where the physical sense still sits on the surface. A direct route is a straight one. To direct someone is to point. To direct a film is to say where everyone stands. Every one of those is the arm coming up. Erect is e plus reger, to straighten outward, to raise something until it is vertical. This is the first time on the map that the line stops lying flat. Straighten a furrow and you get a road. Straighten a post and you get a building. Same verb, rotated 90 degrees. Keep that rotation in mind. The third road is built entirely out of it. And then dress, which nobody sees coming, and which is just direct with the corners worn off. Late Latin built a verb on directus. It came through Old French as dresser, and in Middle English to dress meant to arrange, to put in order, to set straight. Clothing was one thing you could dress. It was not the main thing. You can still hear the old sense once you know it is there. A soldier dresses the line, a drill command meaning straighten up, get aligned. You dress a wound. A shop window is dressed. In every one of those, the word means put this into the order it belongs in, and the clothing sense is simply the version that one. Boethius, writing in a prison cell around the year 524, waiting to be executed. He argues that a human being is the only creature built to stand vertical, and that this is not an accident of anatomy, but a statement about what we are for. And look at the line he writes it with: erect and upright. The root twice, once through Latin, once through the Germanic side English brought in on its own, and both words are that same rotation. The straight line stood on its end. Philosophers argued for 1,000 years that the moral and the vertical were connected. In English, the words had already agreed. The second road is where the line acquires a person. If straightening gets done, somebody does it, and Indo-European had a word for that somebody. The root with a long vowel, rīks, the one who straightens, the one who draws the line and says the line is here. That word became the word for king. It did it in 4 different language families, separately, and they all still sound alike. In Latin, rīks came out as rex, king, genitive regis, which is where the G comes back, regal, regent, regime, regicide. Royal is the softened French version of regalis, kingly. Same word as regal, taken later and worn smoother on the way. And notice what rex literally is. Not the strong one, not the rich one, the one who keeps things straight. Now rich, which I told you to hold on to, because rich is the strangest thing on this map. The Celts had the same king word, proto-Celtic *rīks. You have met it without knowing. It is the rīks on the end of Vercingetorix. The Germanic tribes borrowed it early from their Celtic neighbors as *rīks, king. In Old English, that borrowed word is ris, and it means powerful, high-ranking, mighty, kingly. The money sense is a drift, and the drift tells you what these societies thought a king was. Rich did not start as a word about wealth. It started as a word about being king-like, and then everyone quietly agreed which part of that was the point. The same word is still sitting inside bishopric, the stretch of country a bishop rules, not a bishop's money, a bishop's kingdom. Rule comes from Latin regula, and here is the thing about regula. It does not mean a law, it means a straight stick. A regula is the physical object, the bar, the straight edge, the thing a carpenter lays against a board to check it, which is why the English word still means both. A ruler is a monarch, and a ruler is 12 inches of wood, and English never bothered to separate them, because Latin never separated them either. A rule is a straight line you get measured against. That is not a metaphor attached later. That is the word. Reign is regnum, the kingdom, the thing belonging to the rex, and then regno, to be king over it. It replaced a native English word to do it. Old English already had ris for a reign, from the Celtic borrowing we just met, and French pushed it out. So the language dropped one descendant of this root and picked up another to fill exactly the same hole. English swapped one relative for another, without noticing they were related. And Raja, Sanskrit Rajan, king, same root gone east instead of west, 5,000 miles from Rome. Latin rex, Celtic rīks, Germanic rīks, Sanskrit Rajan. 4 families that stopped speaking to each other before writing existed, and everyone still calls the man in charge by the same syllable, the one that means he draws the line. English now owns all 4. Royal from the Latin, rich from the Celtic through the Germanic, Raja from the Sanskrit through Hindi and the British Empire. Different centuries, different oceans, same word. Dickens' Hard Times. He is describing the house of a man who believes in facts and nothing else, and the garden is ruled straight, like a ledger, like a page with lines printed on it. Ruled straight. Dickens has put the 2 halves of the word back together in 3 syllables, and it is exactly the joke the etymology is making. The garden has been governed, and the garden has been drawn with a straight edge, and in this house, those are one operation. Everything wrong with the man is in that line. He rules his children the way you rule a page. The third road is one compound verb, one, and it produced so much English that it gets its own branch. Latin took sub from below upward and stuck it onto rego, straighten from underneath. Subrego contracted to surgo, to rise. which is the rotation from erect made permanent, not a line lying on the ground anymore, a line standing up on its own. Source came through Old French source, the past participle of sourder from surgo. It meant, originally, a rising, which is a spring, water coming up out of the ground, not flowing along it, coming up out of it. That is a source. The place where the river is vertical for a second before it decides to go somewhere. Then the word did what words do, and now the source of a river and the source of a quotation and the source of an infection are one noun, and every one of them is still a thing rising into view from underneath. Surge is the same Latin verb, taken again later and kept closer to the original shape. Source and surge are doublets, one word that entered English twice and forgot it had met itself. Surge kept the physical violence. A surge of water, of electricity, of prices, of feeling, all the same picture of a level going up faster than expected. Source is the quiet version. Surge is the loud one. Resource is re plus source. Latin resurgo, to rise again, to spring up anew. So a resource is not a pile of something. A resource is the thing that comes back up after you have taken some, a spring that refills, a stock that regrows. The ray is doing real work, which makes the phrase natural resources a small tragedy, given how we have used them. The word assumes they rise again. Now a different prefix. Insurgo, to rise up against. The participle is insurgens, the one who is rising. That is all an insurgent is. Not a fighter, not a criminal, not an ideology. The word says nothing whatsoever about who is right. It describes a direction of travel. Somebody who was down is going up. The most neutral word in the world, doing the most loaded job in the world. And insurrection is the noun for the event insurrectio, a rising up. Here is why this branch is on this map. Insurrection comes from surgo, which is sub plus rego. Rule comes from regula, which is from rego. Royal comes from rex, the same root with a long vowel. The king and the uprising are built out of the same verb. The person imposing the line and the people rising against it are described, in the deepest layer of the language, by one identical idea, making something straight that was not straight before. English has a word for rebellion that is a complement to the government's own founding principle, and nobody noticed, because the complement is 5,000 years old. Tolstoy, Anna Karenina, in English translation, a source of anxiety arose. The same motion, twice in one sentence in two unrelated languages. Arose is Germanic, from an entirely different root, nothing to do with this map, but source already means a rising. The sentence says, a fresh rising of anxiety rose. No translator planned that. It happens because the picture underneath both words is the same, a thing coming up from below into view, and English will hand it to you twice in 9 words without mentioning it. There is the whole map. One straight line, 3 things you can do with it. Lay it down and you get right, correct, direct. Hand it to a man and you get royal, rich, rule, raja. Stand it on its end and you get source, surge, insurrection. Now go back to the 6 words we opened with. Right, which meant straight and still does in 100 phrases nobody hears anymore. A right angle, set it right. Straighten out, go straight. The moral word is a geometry word that got promoted. Royal from rex, the one who straightens. The oldest job description in Europe, and it is not warrior and it is not priest. It is the person who decides where the line goes. Correct, to straighten together, which is what a rule does to a page, and a king does to a country, and a teacher does to a sentence. 3 sizes of the same gesture. Rich, a Celtic king borrowed by Germanic speakers, and then slowly demoted from kingly to wealthy. You can watch a whole change in what people admired happen inside one syllable. Source, arising from below. The same word as insurrection, at a different volume. And dress, which was never about clothes. It was about putting a thing into the line it belongs in, and clothing was simply the most common thing in the world that needed straightening every single morning. One root meaning to make straight. Out of it, the concept of a right, the concept of a king, the concept of a rebellion, and the word for what you are wearing. Same line, We have just been drawing it in different directions for 5,000 years. Every word on that map is in the dictionary at verbalt.com, with its level, its definition, and the sentences it actually appears in. This is Root Atlas, one root at a time until the map is finished.